Imagine waking up every morning with no home to return to. No walls, no roof, no safety. Just endless forests, freezing winds, and the sound of predators hunting nearby. For our ancestors, the cavemen, this was not a nightmare. This was life. But here's the mystery: why didn't they stay in one place? Why not build permanent shelters, settle near rivers, and live in peace? The truth is, cavemen were constantly on the move, walking for days, weeks, and even months, across mountains, plains, and frozen landscapes. And they didn't do this for adventure. They did it because stopping meant death. Before we step into their world, I'd love to know something from you. Where are you watching this from right now? And what time is it where you are? Tell me in the comments. I always find it fascinating to see people from different places and times coming together here. Just like our ancestors once gathered around fire to share their stories. In this journey, we'll uncover the secrets of the Ice Age climate, the chase for food, the dangers of predators, and the search for fire and shelter. By the end, you'll see that every step they took shaped the future of humanity, and perhaps even explains why we, as modern humans, are still restless wanderers at heart. So let's begin, and discover why cavemen were constantly on the move. To understand why cavemen were always moving, we first need to step into the world they lived in. Picture this: the Earth during the Ice Age. Massive sheets of ice stretched across continents. Winters were brutally cold, summers short and unpredictable. One season could bring heavy rains and floods. The next could be so dry that rivers turned into cracked, empty beds. For the cavemen, this unstable climate was the biggest enemy. They couldn't build permanent homes because the land itself was never permanent. A valley that looked safe one year could be frozen solid the next. A forest that provided food might suddenly vanish under snow. Survival meant learning to adapt, and adaptation meant movement. Imagine a small group of hunters and gatherers, maybe 20 to 30 people. They wake up at dawn, wrapped in animal skins, shivering from the night's cold. They don't think about staying for weeks or months. They think about one thing: where to go next. Every sunrise is a reminder that the land can't be trusted for long. The glaciers pushed herds of animals south, so people followed. When the ice melted, rivers swelled, forcing humans to move to higher ground. The weather wasn't just uncomfortable, it was deadly. Staying too long in the wrong place could mean freezing, starving, or drowning. And so the cavemen became wanderers not by choice, but by necessity. Modern archaeology supports this. Scientists have studied layers of soil and fossils, showing sudden shifts in climate. One region might have been warm and green for a decade, and then suddenly buried under ice. Imagine building your shelter, hunting nearby animals, raising your children, and then within a few years everything you depend on disappears. That's why cavemen never risked settling. They kept moving because the earth itself was unpredictable. Another thing to remember: cavemen didn't have maps, compasses, or weather forecasts. Their only guide was instinct and the signs of nature. They watched the skies, the migration of birds, the movement of animals. If they noticed herds leaving, they followed. If the winds shifted, they packed up and went. Their lives were a constant lesson in listening to nature, because ignoring those signals meant death. Think about how different this is from our lives today. We have houses, heaters, and grocery stores. But for them, climate was everything. A single storm could wipe out food sources. A sudden freeze could trap them. Every step they took was part of a larger survival game played against the earth itself. And yet, there's something inspiring here. While the climate forced them to move, it also shaped their strength. Cavemen became skilled walkers, capable of covering vast distances. Their bodies grew tough, their minds sharp. They learned resilience not in comfort, but in the face of endless change. In a way, it was the harsh climate that made humans into the adaptable species we are today. So, when we ask why cavemen were constantly on the move, the first and most powerful reason is simple. The earth gave them no other choice. The land shifted, The weather turned, and survival depended on never staying in one place for too long. But climate was only the beginning. If the world outside didn't push them forward, their hunger did. And that brings us to their endless search for food, the next piece of the puzzle in understanding why cavemen never stopped moving. If the climate pushed cavemen to move, hunger pulled them even further. Food was never guaranteed, and in a world without farming or permanent storage, survival meant chasing after every meal. Let's imagine the daily reality. A small tribe wakes up in the cold morning air. Children cry from hunger. The older members look weak, and the hunters prepare to move. Staying in one place meant the berries would be eaten, the roots dug up, the animals hunted away. Nothing remained for long. Once food ran out, the people had no choice but to move on. Hunting was never easy. It required teamwork, patience, and risk. Cavemen tracked herds of wild animals like mammoths, bison, and reindeer. But these herds were constantly migrating themselves, searching for grasslands and water. If the hunters didn't follow, they starved. Imagine watching a herd disappear into the horizon, knowing that if you don't keep walking, your people won't survive the winter. Now think about what hunting actually meant. There were no bows, no guns. Early humans used spears, stones, and traps. Sometimes they would chase animals into narrow paths or toward cliffs using the land itself as a weapon. It was dangerous. One mistake and the hunter could be trampled or gored. But the reward was worth the risk. A single mammoth could feed a tribe for weeks. Gathering was just as important. While men often hunted, women and children searched for plants, nuts, and fruits. This might sound simple, but it was life or death. You couldn't just pick anything that looked edible. Some berries were poisonous, some roots dangerous. Over generations, knowledge was passed down. Which plants healed, which ones killed, which could keep a child alive through a long winter night. Here's something fascinating. Archaeologists have found ancient grinding stones with traces of seeds and grains. This shows that cavemen didn't only eat meat. They also experimented with plants and grasses. But again, no single area could provide everything forever. Once the local plants were stripped, they had to move on to new land. And then there's the reality of competition. Cavemen weren't the only hunters. Packs of wolves, lions, and even giant bears were after the same prey. Sometimes tribes followed herds only to find predators already waiting. Imagine arriving at a river valley hungry and exhausted only to see saber-toothed cats stalking the animals you hope to hunt. The only option? Move again, keep searching, keep walking. This endless hunt shaped the daily rhythm of life. Walk, track, gather, hunt, eat, rest, and then do it all again. No permanent fields, no stored harvests, no guarantee of tomorrow's meal. That's why staying in one place too long was impossible. Nature demanded movement, and hunger made sure they obeyed. One thing we often forget is how skilled these early humans were. They didn't just chase animals blindly. They read the land like an open book. They noticed broken branches, footprints in mud, the smell of dung, the way birds circled above. These were signs, clues in a larger puzzle of survival. Following animals wasn't luck, it was knowledge, passed down through generations of observation and experience. And when food was found, it became a moment of celebration. Picture a successful hunt, a mammoth finally brought down after hours of struggle. The tribe gathers around, children eat their fill, fires burn through the night. For a short while, life feels secure. But deep down, everyone knows the truth. The food won't last. The herd will move, the plants will wither, and soon they will walk again. This is why hunting and gathering made cavemen nomads. The land gave food only in small doses, scattered across vast distances. To survive, they had to become travelers, wanderers who carried the memory of where food had once been, and the courage to search for where it might be next. In many ways, this shaped who we are as humans. We are natural seekers, explorers, problem solvers, because our ancestors had no other choice. Hunger forced them to keep going, to risk, to adapt. It carved restlessness into our very bones. So when we look back and ask why cavemen never settled, The answer is clear. The stomach is the strongest motivator. Climate pushed them, but hunger gave them no mercy. Every day was a reminder that survival meant movement. But food wasn't the only reason to stay on the move. Even if a tribe found shelter and enough to eat, there was another threat waiting in the shadows: predators. And this danger made sure cavemen never grew too comfortable in one place. That's the story we'll explore next. Even if a tribe had food and temporary shelter, there was another constant reminder that life was fragile: predators. The Ice Age world was not only cold and unpredictable, it was filled with powerful hunters that considered humans nothing more than prey. Imagine the darkness of night. The fire burns low, the tribe huddles close together, and outside the forest is alive with sound. A snapping branch, the low growl of a beast, yellow eyes glowing in the shadows. For cavemen, danger never slept. Wolves, cave lions, saber-toothed cats, and even giant bears stalked the same land they did. Staying too long in one area meant predators learned where you were, and once they did, survival demanded that you move. Let's take the saber-toothed cat as an example. With its massive fangs and muscular body, it was one of the most feared predators of the Ice Age. A single ambush could wipe out a hunter, or even threaten an entire tribe. Humans had fire and weapons, but compared to these animals, they were fragile. Avoiding them often meant traveling to safer ground. Wolves and wild dogs presented another challenge. Unlike big cats that hunted alone, wolves worked in packs, surrounding their prey. For small human tribes, this was terrifying. Imagine setting up camp near a forest edge and suddenly hearing the howls of wolves echoing in the distance. Do you risk fighting them off every night? Or do you gather your people and keep moving before the pack closes in? Most often, the answer was movement. Even the caves that seem safe in our imagination weren't always safe in reality. Archaeologists have discovered that many caves once used by humans also held the remains of large predators. In fact, humans were often competing with animals for the same shelters. A cave that offered warmth and protection one season might already belong to a bear or lion the next. That constant risk forced people to remain flexible, never too attached, never too settled. This is where fire changed everything. Fire wasn't just warmth, it was protection. Flames kept predators at a distance, and the smoke carried a warning scent that many animals avoided. But firewood ran out quickly. If the tribe burned too much, the forest around them was stripped bare. And when the fire faded, danger returned. This meant even fire, as powerful as it was, couldn't hold them in one place forever. Predators didn't only threaten lives, they also threatened food. If wolves or lions reached the herds first, the hunters lost their chance to eat. Imagine following reindeer for days, only to find a pack of predators had already taken them down. In that moment, cavemen weren't just competing against nature, they were competing against every creature fighting to survive. The only strategy was to keep moving, keep searching, stay one step ahead. Now think about the psychological weight of this. Today, most of us fall asleep in locked houses, protected from danger. But cavemen lived with fear every night. Every sound in the dark could mean an attack. Every pause on their journey could mean predators catching up. This constant tension carved a simple rule into their minds. Never stay too long, never make yourself an easy target. But there's something remarkable here. These dangers didn't only scare humans, they made them smarter. To survive predators, cavemen developed stronger teamwork. They built better weapons, learned to track enemies, and perfected the use of fire. Predators forced humans to think ahead, to prepare, to adapt. In a way, danger shaped intelligence. So when we ask why cavemen were always moving, predators are a huge part of the answer. Food could be replaced, shelters could be rebuilt, but if a tribe became prey, it was the end. The best defense was mobility. To live, they had to walk. To survive, they had to stay ahead of the hunters of the night. And yet, even with predators behind them and hunger pushing them forward, there was still another force shaping their journey. The constant search for shelter and fire. Because while food and safety kept them alive, warmth and home, even temporary, gave them strength to keep going. And that's where we turn next. For cavemen, food and safety were not the only struggles. Even if they hunted successfully and avoided predators, they still faced another daily battle, the fight against nature itself. Wind, rain, snow, and freezing nights could kill just as quickly as hunger or a lion's claws. And this is where shelter and fire became the thin line between life and death. Let's start with shelter. Today, when we think of a home, we imagine comfort, walls, warmth, security. But for cavemen, shelter was anything that kept the storm off their skin for a few hours. Sometimes that meant caves. Other times it meant simple huts made from branches, animal hides, and bones. These were not permanent homes. They were fragile, temporary, and often abandoned as soon as the tribe moved again. Caves seem perfect in our imagination, strong, protective, and safe. But in reality, not all caves were suitable. Many were damp, dark, and filled with dangerous animals. Some were too cold, others too small. And as we saw earlier, humans often had to compete with predators for these spaces. So while caves were useful, they weren't always available. That's why many groups built quick shelters on the open land, breaking them down when it was time to move. But even the best shelter meant nothing without fire. Fire was life. Fire was warmth on a frozen night, light in endless darkness, and protection when predators circled nearby. For cavemen, fire was more than survival. It was hope. Imagine a tribe gathering wood, striking stones together, or carefully feeding sparks until a flame caught. The moment fire was lit, everything changed. The cold air softened, shadows retreated. The tribe could cook food, harden weapons, and most importantly, feel safe enough to rest. But keeping fire alive was a challenge in itself. Rain, wind, or even a careless mistake could put it out, leaving the group exposed and desperate. Because of this, early humans treated fire like treasure. Some tribes carried burning branches with them when they moved, protecting the flame as they traveled. Others kept embers buried in ash so they could relight fires quickly. Fire was never taken for granted. It was guarded like the heartbeat of the tribe. But here's the problem. Wood ran out. In colder regions, forests were scarce, and once an area was stripped of trees, the tribe had no choice but to leave. Even if they wanted to stay, they couldn't survive without fuel. Fire demanded constant movement, just like food and safety did. And yet, fire also brought something deeper: community. Around the flames, people gathered to eat, to talk, and to share stories. Archaeologists believe that firelight may have been the birthplace of human culture. Songs, myths, even the first ideas of who we were as a species. All of these may have been born in the glow of a campfire. Fire didn't just keep them alive, it gave them identity. But the search for shelter and fire came with a cost. Imagine traveling for days in bitter cold, carrying children, tools, and food supplies, only to arrive in a place with no dry wood, no cave, no protection. The choice was cruel: keep moving while exhausted or risk freezing to death. And so once again, cavemen were pushed to wander further. This constant movement shows us something important. Our ancestors were never meant to stand still. Their entire lives were built around adapting, adjusting, and searching. Shelter was temporary. Fire was fragile. Only movement kept them alive long enough to try again. And yet, out of this endless cycle, humans grew stronger. They learned how to build better shelters, how to control fire, how to carry it across long distances. They invented new ways to cook food, warm themselves, and protect their young. What began as desperation slowly became innovation, and innovation became survival. So when we think about cavemen moving across endless landscapes, it wasn't just about chasing food or running from predators. It was about chasing warmth, chasing safety, chasing a fragile flame that meant the difference between life and death. And in doing so, they set the foundation for everything that would follow: villages, towns, and eventually cities. But we're not done yet. Because even with food, safety, and fire, there was still one more powerful force driving their movement: curiosity. Humans weren't just survivors, they were explorers. And that restless spirit is what we'll uncover next. So far, we've seen how cavemen moved to survive, chasing food, escaping predators, and searching for shelter and fire. But survival wasn't the only reason humans kept walking. There was another force, less visible but just as powerful: curiosity. The desire to see what was beyond the horizon, to explore, to discover. Think about it. If survival was the only goal, humans could have stayed near rivers and fertile lands forever. But they didn't. They pushed forward, crossing deserts, mountains, and frozen tundras. Why? Because something inside them wanted to know what was out there. That restless spirit wasn't just survival instinct, it was human nature. Imagine a small tribe living at the edge of a great forest. They have food, they have fire, and for once they are safe. But then one of them looks toward the distance, where the trees end and the land opens into a new world. What lies beyond? More animals? More danger? Or something better? That question alone was enough to make people move. This curiosity was more than simple wandering. It was evolution at work. By exploring new lands, humans discovered new food sources, new shelters, and new ways of living. They found rivers rich with fish, valleys filled with game, and caves that offered protection. Every step into the unknown gave them knowledge that increased their chances of survival. But curiosity also came with risk. Many journeys ended in disaster. Tribes starving in deserts, freezing in mountains, or being lost in endless plains. Yet even those failures taught lessons. Over time, humans built maps in their minds. They remembered which lands were safe, which seasons brought migrations, which rivers always flowed. This collective memory became a tool passed from generation to generation, shaping the path of humanity. One of the greatest achievements of this curiosity was migration. Scientists believe that tens of thousands of years ago, small bands of humans began walking out of Africa, not because they had to, but because they wanted to see what else the world held. Step by step, they spread across continents into Asia, Europe, and beyond. They crossed icy land bridges, sailed simple rafts, and entered lands no human had ever seen before. This was not only survival, this was exploration at its purest form. And think about the courage this required. To walk into a land with no guarantee of food, no knowledge of predators, no idea if survival was even possible, that takes more than instinct. That takes imagination. That takes belief that something better could exist beyond the horizon. In that sense, cavemen were the first dreamers, the first travelers, the first explorers. This spirit of curiosity also explains why humans developed tools, art, and language. When they encountered new lands, they needed new ways to adapt. When they met other tribes, they needed better communication. And when they discovered beauty in nature, they wanted to capture it. Painting on cave walls, carving bones, and telling stories around fire. Movement gave birth to culture, but curiosity wasn't just about land and resources. It was also about people. Tribes didn't live in isolation forever. Sometimes they crossed paths with others, and those meetings changed everything. They exchanged tools, shared knowledge, and even formed alliances. Through exploration, humanity began to connect, weaving the first threads of community that would one day lead to civilizations. Now let's pause and think about what this means for us today. We no longer live in caves or wander forests, but that same restless spirit still lives in us. It's why we climb mountains, cross oceans, build cities, and even send rockets into space. The same curiosity that drove cavemen to explore new valleys is the same force pushing us to explore Mars. It is a part of who we are: wanderers, explorers, storytellers. So when we ask, why were cavemen constantly on the move? The answer is not simple. It wasn't just food, it wasn't just predators, it wasn't just fire or shelter. It was all of these things mixed with a deep, unstoppable curiosity that made humans different from every other animal. We didn't just move to survive. We moved to discover, and maybe that's the greatest legacy of our ancestors. Their footsteps, pressed into mud and snow thousands of years ago, are the first chapters of our story. Every journey they took, every risk they faced, every horizon they chased, all of it led to us. We are the children of explorers. We carry their spirit every time we ask a question, every time we take a step into the unknown. So next time you look at a map, or stare at the night sky, or wonder what's beyond the next hill, remember, you're not just curious. You're human. And curiosity is the reason we are still here today. Looking back at the lives of cavemen, one truth stands out clearly. Survival meant movement. Every choice, every step, was tied to the forces of nature. The bitter cold forced them forward. The hunt pulled them across valleys and plains. Predators reminded them to never stay in one place too long. Fire gave them hope. But even that fragile flame demanded new wood and new journeys. And finally, curiosity, that restless spark, carried them further than they ever needed to go. Movement was not a habit, it was their destiny. But within this endless wandering, something incredible was born. Each struggle made them stronger. Each challenge gave them new skills. Fire became the center of community. The hunt became the first lesson in teamwork. Exploration became the foundation of human culture. Cavemen did not only survive the world, they shaped the future through every step they took. When we walk today on paved roads, when we sit in homes with warmth and light, it's easy to forget how fragile life once was. And yet the restless spirit of our ancestors is still with us. It whispers when we dream of new adventures, when we seek challenges, when we ask questions about the unknown. Their footsteps echo in our choices, in our journeys, and in our curiosity. So when we ask why were cavemen constantly on the move, the answer is simple and yet powerful. They moved because they had no choice. But they also moved because movement was the key to becoming human. To walk, to adapt, to explore. That is what made us who we are. If you enjoyed this journey into the lives of cavemen, don't forget to give this video a like. It helps the channel grow and lets me know you'd like more stories like this. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next adventure into our past. Thank you for walking through history with me today. Until next time, keep moving, keep learning, and keep exploring.